All right, so to kick things off, I will ask each of our toolsmiths to introduce themselves. Who are you? What's your tool? What's it good for? And we will start with Rangsk.
Hello. So for those who don't know me, I'm Rangsk. I do more than tools. I also have a YouTube channel, which I'm very happy to self-promote. For those who don't know it, it is just Rangsk, R-A-N-G-S-K, where I solve Sudokus and other kinds of puzzles on my channel every day. But many of you probably know me because of my solver that you use. And I've actually had a few questions over just one or two times where people have trouble installing it. So I thought I would show the installation of my tool as well as what it is useful for in a hopefully brief format here. So I'm just going to open up. This is called a web browser for those who don't know that. So we're going to go to the link to my solver, which is github.com/my username dclamage, and then it's Sudoku solver. But feel free to ask me for a link, or on various Discords, such as the Cracking the Cryptic Discord, I do have a channel devoted to my solver, which you can find. So once you're on here, there is a releases. I did release the 1.0 version before SudokuCon, which was a long time coming. And so you can go here, and there are links to an installation guide, but today I am the installation guide. And so these are the download links. Let me go over each one, depending on what platform you're on. So majority of Windows users, this is like 99.99% of Windows users are going to want this first link. The second link is if you have an ARM64 Windows machine. And I think if you had one, you would know that because they're extremely rare. But they do exist, and this is a build for those. We now have a single download for all Mac OS users, whether you're an old Mac or a new Mac. And this is now signed and a DMG installer, so it should be much more familiar to Mac users, and you don't have to go through 50 security warnings to install it. And then Linux users, I don't know why you're downloading a release instead of building it yourself, but you can if you'd like to. Because we're lazy. All right, so I am on Windows, so I'm going to be downloading the Windows executable. Now, the reason I get this question a lot, why do I have to install something for this? Well, this uses your native hardware instead of JavaScript in the browser to run the solver at native speed. So you're going to get a speed boost performance from that. And also, I didn't write it in JavaScript, so it doesn't work in JavaScript. So this is going to get you a zip file with just a few files in it. I recommend just making a folder somewhere. I'm going to do it on my C drive. You can do it on your desktop. It doesn't matter where, as long as you remember where. And Mac users, you're going to have a different experience. You're going to have your typical installer experience that you're used to, but you're still going to need to know where that folder is that you put it. So I'm just going to make a new folder here, and I'm going to call it Sudoku Solver. You can call it Rangsk's Awesome Solver if you'd like to, and then just drag everything in there. So this comes with a few things. The most important is that it comes with 2 user scripts. Don't worry, I'll explain what that is. This allows you to modify the fpuzzles website to integrate my solver. So you can use my solver on command line, and if you know what that means, you also know to look for documentation on how that works. But most people will integrate it with fpuzzles. And so what you're going to do is first you're going to install the TamperMonkey plugin if you haven't. So you're going to Google TamperMonkey, and you're going to let TamperMonkey explain how to install. I think I will actually install it here because it doesn't appear to be on this account's browser. So let me just, I don't know why they're, okay. These are the fake download links from ads, right? So we gotta go to TamperMonkey get from store here, and then add to Chrome. So I guess if you don't have an ad blocker, watch out for that. But all right, so that installed TamperMonkey, and now what I can do is I can go into TamperMonkey here, which is in my plugins. I'm going to pin that, and I'm going to go to Dashboard, and in settings, we are able to import a user script from file. So that is somehow not here. Does anyone see it? Maybe it's not, oh, it's utilities. That's because I went to the wrong tab. There we go. Import zip, or no, choose file, import from file, choose file. There we go. So we just browse to where we extracted those, and we just do one at a time. I'm going to do just in order, this new constraints. You just hit install, and then choose file, Sudoku solver, hit install. Okay. So the last thing we want to do, and you have to do this anytime you boot up your computer and want to use the solver, or anytime you want to use the solver, you just double click on this listen script. Now all this does is it runs the solver with a specific listen command line to tell it that you want to listen for an fpuzzles connection. And so double clicking that will just get you right there, and it now shows a nice splash screen which shows you how to support me and how to visit my YouTube channel if you'd like. And so now when I go to fpuzzles, oops, I'm used to f- going to fpuzzles on my browser. There we go. So this is normal fpuzzles, but there are additional user scripts you can install, which I highly recommend. So let's actually go through that right now that we know how to do user scripts. If you go to the fpuzzles integration wiki site, and I'm sorry for going fast, but we are limited on time. If you scroll down here, there's a bunch of scripts, and I've now organized them by essential, recommended, and optional. So for example, this one here, if your laptop starts sounding like a jet engine whenever you open fpuzzles, this fixes that. So we can just copy this URL, for example, and go into TamperMonkey again. And in the utilities, we can instead just import from URL, and we can paste that in there. And then now, if there's ever any updates to it, it'll automatically update from that URL as well. So that installs that. And then we've got a lot of people ask how to embed solutions. This is a utility that allows you to do that. So we'll install that as well. And as you can see, once you know how to do it, it really isn't too bad. It'll take you a couple minutes max just to get through and install these. I am working with Afraid Not, who now owns fpuzzles, to get these to be just default in fpuzzles. But for now, this is the process to improve fpuzzles to not be a 5-year-old version of fpuzzles. I'm also just going to do these 2 recommended ones, and we will stop there. So there we go. And right, once these are all installed, we just need to, so let me show you the difference here. This is your stock fpuzzles here. But if I were to refresh, is TamperMonkey not, not executed yet. Oh, there might be, yeah, so this is the other thing. Chrome has made it more difficult to use TamperMonkey. So we need to enable developer mode in Chrome. And so I think we can just search for it here. Hold on. Now I'm going to Google how to do it. Chrome, this is how you solve problems here. Enable, unless someone here knows already, but. Extensions here? And then, thank you, there's this little developer mode here under extensions settings. And when you turn that on, hopefully now it'll actually work. Do I need to restart the browser or what? Okay. Let's try closing the browser and reopening it. I'm not the Chrome dev, so that's not my forte here. There we go. There we go. So you're going to be asked to, if you use the JSON editor, you are going to be asked to allow this. So we're going to hit allow once here, I guess. All right, so now fpuzzles looks very different. First of all, we have a bunch of new constraints here. So I'm going to try to remember which ones are stock, but you also notice it's 2 columns instead of being a very squished 1 column if you have an older version. But what this adds is German whispers, Dutch whispers, entropic lines, modular lines, region sum lines, Nabners, which is Renban backwards for those who don't know, double arrows. So we have a few Zeta inventions added here. We've got zipper lines. We've got, we've got X-sums. We got skyscraper. And we've got 3 kinds of indexers, row, column, and box indexers. And we also have fog lights, so if you want to enable fog of war, you can just place lights. Or you can just turn on the fog for the whole puzzle without needing to place any lights. So that is the constraint tool user script that came with the solver that did that. We also have, I'm on Renban mode. We also have the Sudoku Pad style blue outline selection, which is quite nice. And we have multi-color highlighting. So inspired by Sudoku Pad, so it makes it more used to what you're used to. All right, but the big thing is my solver. So I am still running the solver here. You just got to have that open in the background, and there is a new connect button up here. So you just hit connect, and hopefully it works, and it turns into a button that says disconnect. If so, that means you are connected. So now what we have here is, this is the big feature of the solver that most people are using, which is the true candidate button here. If you turn that on, then this will use a brute force solver to, in real time, as you set your puzzle, update with what candidates are still possible from all possible solutions to your puzzle. So for example, if I were to add a killer cage, I think everyone's familiar with those. This does not improve the ability to find the constraints in the list. In fact, it makes it harder. But if I make a 10 cage here, for example, then I have to have numlock on and then make a 10 cage. Then now it is updated to a 1, 2, 3, 4, just as you set. So now if I do, say, 15 here, now that's a 6, 7, 8, 9. And if I turn on anti-night, then suddenly random things disappear for no reason because it's anti-night. So yeah, this is extremely useful. The only thing it's not super useful for is if you have a negative constraint. So I just recommend don't setting those. I wouldn't actually mind if those disappeared. So, for those who like 159, the row indexers are actually the opposite. So you want a column indexer. I always forget what I name these things, even though I name them. But hopefully in the tooltip, in the column indexer, I do have a parenthetical saying this one is used by the standard 159. So we can just draw the 159 in here. And you can also see that random things disappear because 159 is. So now everything has turned to X's because even with the 2 small killer cages I've added, there are no solutions to this 159 puzzle. Oh, I do. That probably is actually the real reason. So there you go. So that is a very small introduction to my solver. I do have videos. I have a video especially linked on my wiki for the solver where I go through setting a classic Sudoku and using my solver to preserve an advanced technique that I wanted to make sure it had no bypasses with easier techniques. So if that sort of thing interests you, you can watch that. I'm also have done several setting videos, for example, collaborative and on my own, and I always use fpuzzles my solver for that. So I feel like that's I'm going to take more time than my colleagues explaining my tool, but that is the essential Rangsk solver.
It's really not that hard to install that stuff, even on a Linux system. I find that, certainly under Firefox, Tamper Monkey's a pig, and I usually have it turned off when I don't actually need it. Just to, you might want to, if you set this all up and then find that your browser is running like molasses uphill, turn off Tamper Monkey until you actually need it. Who's next? Sirxemic, would you come and introduce yourself? And your tool, which we were all using yesterday.
Hey everyone, I'm Sirxemic. I'm the creator of Sudoku Maker. Thank you. I don't think I need a tutorial on it. I think everyone saw Juggler's presentation yesterday, even though it was a bit fast-paced. I'll just show it on screen for some eye candy. So yeah, I'm the creator of this tool. I've been working on this for 3 years now. And I built this basically as a replacement for fpuzzles on mobile. Because there were no mobile setters at that time, and I felt like we needed one. So I built this, and at this point, it's far more than just a setup for mobile. I created it as a tool to create your own constraints with and experiment with those as well. Like have a constraint in mind and then let the computer help you with that new constraint you created made up. Not sure if there's something else to say at this point. Glad to see that so many people are making amazing puzzles with it. It's very surreal to be here and see it used for so many things. So thank you for that. That's it.
And then we have one more tool to introduce. Is there anybody here who's ever heard of Sudoku Pad? Meet Sven.
Well, I've created Sudoku Pad. This is a tool probably a lot of you are familiar with. It's not the only tool you can play puzzles in. I often cross over into communities that play Sudoku all day by the thousands that know nothing about any of us. So we're an island of variant Sudoku solvers, of very advanced players, I think. But there's a large world of people who just play their daily classic Sudokus out there as well. And I think one of the things we want to do is maybe bring some of those people into the fold and, instead of them getting bored with boring puzzles, show them how exciting and interesting they can be. I guess I'll show something of Sudoku Pad that many of you might have seen but isn't very interesting, which is the homepage of Sudoku Pad. Yeah. And this page was launched before Sudoku Pad went live as an info page for the testers, for the early testers, just like, hey, let's see if this thing works. And it hasn't really changed since then, which is a little bit the story of Sudoku Pad as a whole as well. And it's also very confusing because a lot of people that are outside of our community that contact me, they look at this, especially commercial entities, it's like, oh, we want to advertise on your site and we love your page, and they link to this thing. And that tells me that they haven't really looked into it very much. In fact, you can find some of the very early cracking the cryptic puzzles here that won't have a solution check, that won't have rules, they won't have author names, because those things didn't exist yet back then. I think we've come a long way, and that's something to be proud of. Just a very short history of how Sudoku Pad came about. I, like many of you, discovered cracking the cryptic during COVID. I watched a few of their videos, and it very quickly occurred to me that Simon was complaining a lot about things in the software. And he was very often referencing of, oh yeah, our guy's working on it, it'll be fixed. Oh, this will change soon. And after a few weeks of that, I realized maybe this wasn't happening. And I tweeted to him and said, like, if this thing that you're complaining about, if you want that, I can probably fix it. And he's like, oh yeah, that would be great, right? And so I basically kind of cloned the original software, and by cloned, I don't mean I looked at the code, I just started from scratch and okay, let's make the buttons the same color and put them in the same places. And that was kind of the first version of Sudoku Pad, the first prototype. And then over a couple of months, I kind of chiseled away at it. I said, hey, let's make icons for the tools, and let's, things like the colors were added very early on. And then pretty much within the first year or so, Cracking the Cryptic fully switched to Sudoku Pad. And some of the early videos, they still switched back to the old software when there was stuff that I didn't support, or when they made a quick change and they didn't have time to get it working and all that. But that's kind of how it came about. And not too dissimilar from Sudoku Maker or some of the other tools, just a few months earlier really, and where there was nobody else but Cracking the Cryptic to talk to. And I think one of the main secrets of success for Sudoku Pad was that I always put a lot of value on backwards compatibility. The initial puzzles were all from the original tool by Sam Captain Online, who built the original tool, and I made sure that those puzzles always work. They still work to this day. Under the bonnet, a lot of things are still similar. And anything that was done since then in various different tools, Penpa, fpuzzles, the Sudoku Maker, and a couple of others, Sudoku Studio even, I've always tried very hard to make them all sort of work together. More or less, you know, some of you, oh, things are not pill-shaped, they're ovals here or there. So there's some differences, but you know, it's an ongoing thing. It'll never be finished. Yeah, and I very highly encourage anybody that has any idea or any complaint or any issue or discovers something weird, get in touch with me. Don't think I already know. The number of times when I found out about a thing that's been around for months, and everybody said, oh, you probably knew I didn't want to bother you. And I'm like, this is important, I need to fix this. Why didn't anybody tell me? Yeah, it's a tough thing. It's a large piece of software by now. It's a messy piece of software, so it's very hard to test it thoroughly. I spend a lot of time testing, but I'll test it on basic puzzles. I don't test it on creative things, on strange things. So it's very easy for somebody to do something weird with it, and that might break down the line, and I might not realize. So, you know, let me know. Yeah, and that's it. I mean, other than that, the focus of Sudoku Pad is the quality of the user experience of solving puzzles. I very deliberately currently do not have any tools for creating puzzles. It's something I've looked into the past, but, you know, Sirxemic spent 3 years on that. So I would have taken 3 more years to do something as good as Sudoku Maker, right? So in the moment, that's I think, a very good distribution of labor and a distribution of creative energies as well. This way, we all keep each other on our toes. I think more interesting things happen because things aren't always exactly in tune. And you know, yesterday somebody asked me, "Oh, how did they do that?" And I'm like, "I have no idea." You know, I'd have to look at the code because they did something that I know might theoretically be possible, but I don't know how they did it. And that's, I think, part of the strength of Sudoku Pad is that it's not super well defined and that people can do unexpected things with it that it wasn't designed to do. And it might not be best software engineering practices to do things that way, but I think it's enabled a lot of creativity. And you know, it's nothing without the puzzles. And I'm not making any puzzles, so it's the puzzle makers that do it.
So I want to start by picking up on one of the words that Sven used. He talked about various communities that he belongs to and various other communities that do puzzles. And just to get discussion started among our panelists, I want to ask each of you, what do you think is your role within this community? And for that matter, what community do you think you have roles in?
So I feel like, oh, is this on? Testing, there we go. So I feel like I kind of straddle a few different roles in the community because I have my role as kind of the technical guy who a lot of people use my solver, and you know I very active in, say, the theory and programming channel on CTC, which CTC Discord, which I think a lot of you probably avoid. But I really enjoy being part of that community. But also, I have a huge community through my YouTube as well, and I have my own Discord server that I share with other YouTubers in the more general puzzle community, not just Sudoku. And so I feel like I have different roles in those two communities, and it's often actually difficult for me to kind of figure out who I'm talking as right now. In terms of like, oh, am I replying to this person as the guy who made the solver that they're using, or am I replying as the guy who they watch YouTube videos, or both? And so I think when I'm kind of in the role of the solver, I feel like it's helping setters get their vision to life. And I think the kind of origin of my solver is I was having trouble setting certain kinds of puzzles, and I was like, the tools out there right now, they have solvers, but they work more like how your traditional classic Sudoku solver works, which is designed to either computer generate very difficult classics, which are hard to generate otherwise, unless you're Clover, but or Philip Newman, but a few others who I won't mention. But they're designed by people who already have a puzzle and want to learn about that puzzle, right? So what techniques can be used to solve it? I'm at this point, can I get a hint? That kind of thing. You're trying to solve it. Whereas as a setter, you have a different set of needs, like not just how many solutions are left, are there solutions left, but also what is kind of the general idea of what those solutions look like. And so that's, I think the true candidates in my solver is the most popular feature for a really good reason, because as a setter, you don't want to find out that for the past 30 minutes you've been adding clues to a puzzle that has no solutions to it, which I think happened a lot before my solver came around and happens a lot less now. So it's about supporting you being able to make your own vision and educating on how to utilize my tools, at least in the way that I understand. And also learning how people use my tool in ways that I don't understand. But then also through my YouTube community, I feel like I provide a kind of safe space for people to shelter from everything else they're seeing in their feeds every day. So, you know, you're scrolling, you're doom scrolling, and then my video comes up and it's just about puzzles. So I think that's nice. And a lot of people will just put my videos on to fall asleep, and I'm perfectly fine with that. I think Simon is used that way too. So, but yeah, or like just during a lunch break, watching me solve a crossword puzzle, just, you know, just chill, and you know, you're not hearing about everything else that's going on, because you're hearing about that the other 23 and a half hours of the day. So. I feel like that's my role is, and so the important thing for people here at SudokuCon, there's a lot of setters here. My role, I feel like, is making you be able to get to your vision and make your puzzle with a lot less frustration, smoothing out the rough edges. So.
Yeah, so my role is basically, I'm just a creative Sudoku Maker. Well, to be honest, I do like, people come to me with questions about Sudoku Maker, like how to do certain stuff, and I'm glad to help them. I like what people make with it, the creativity that Sudoku Maker allows them to have, to express. It's really amazing to see, like when I made Sudoku Maker, I didn't even expect people to make the puzzles that they make with it. I've seen people use the cosmetic line tool as a painting brush, like just to make art with, and that's crazy. Like because of those edge cases, or maybe just normal cases, I feel like I've made something that people that makes people think about puzzles in a new way, and I'm glad to explore that with them. Sorry.
I think this is all the amplification I need. So for me, there's two kinds of communities I was thinking about. One is, you know, puzzlers. And for example, a couple of years ago, I was looking into Unicode support, and going through the puzzles, I found a lot of Chinese characters in titles. And going down that rabbit hole, I found a lot of Sudoku videos made on Chinese video sites, completely independent of YouTube, nothing to do with our Discord, people who probably don't speak English, whole rule sets written in Chinese. You know, a year and a half ago, my Steam app sales doubled for a month, and it took me a while to figure out that was all China. So there was something happening in China using Sudoku Pad, doing puzzles, setting puzzles, I don't know how, I don't know what tools they use, but basically with zero overlap with us. No communications, no emails, no nothing. And right now there isn't a good way for us to bring these disparate groups together or communicate together, because they don't know about our Discord, we don't know they exist, there's no messaging board on Sudoku Pad and things like that. So these are things I think about how to improve on. And I feel like as a first entry point, because for example, Cracking the Cryptic brings in a lot of people that aren't necessarily members of the community. You know, they watch the videos, they might click on a link, they might play a puzzle or two, and then they might disappear, and they might not join the Discord. And I feel part of my job is to find ways of keeping them around, of bringing them in, of showing them what else there is, and the site isn't doing a good job of that at the moment. And a lot of the thinking I'm doing is how to change that, how to improve that, how to let people transition from watching one video and clicking on a link to discovering the community, to finding the beauty of the really creative puzzles that exist. That's one kind of community, the puzzlers, you know, in and out. And of course, you know, if you go on Reddit Sudoku, there's the occasional Sudoku Pad screenshot, but most people are there for their daily Sudoku.com or the New York Times puzzles, and they never find our apps, or they have some random mobile app and they think, oh, it's kind of naff and this is not really great. And those are also people who should be able to find our puzzles, and currently they do not. Those are the puzzling communities, but recently I've also discovered other types of communities. I found quite a few conferences now that use Sudoku Pad on a big screen like that, and it tells me I need to support those people. I need to make that easier because they, you know, they show Sudoku Pad to an audience that otherwise might not see it. I want to build presentation tools. I want to build tools that support YouTubers. You know, there's YouTubers who use the app. You know, I discover more all the time that I've never heard of. Sometimes I browse Twitch and suddenly there's a Sudoku Pad screenshot. You know, where did that come from, right? And there's tools I've been working on for a while, and I need to do a better job of that to support different layouts, where the camera goes, how to manage puzzles, how to avoid issues with a new release, breaking somebody. You know, I've put jokes into the app, and suddenly people told me I screwed their workday because, you know, they're recording videos ahead of time, and it's not April Fool's in a week, and you know, they had a hair on their screen or something. So there's a lot of weird considerations that are outside of just setting puzzles and playing puzzles that I do, that I try to tackle. But it also keeps it interesting because it shows me there's a lot of other things there, and there's a lot of opportunity to kind of like reach people that we aren't familiar with, that we think, oh, we're just these hardcore Sudoku and puzzle players, you know. But like, there's academics, there's students, there's maths people, there's you know, the researchers, there's all sorts of other things. Video game designers, you know, I remember one of the earliest presentations with Sudoku Pad, and I saw was by somebody talking about video games, and they use Sudokus as an example of game design techniques and things like that. Yeah, and I think my role there is a little, like, yes, at the same time, I gotta implement the extra colors and make the digits work properly and make the emojis render the same on a phone. But there's also all this other stuff that I think is my role, and it's tricky because I'm a programmer at heart, and some of those things I can't solve with just programming. So that's why I ask for patience sometimes when some obvious simple things aren't changed immediately, when people think like, hey, that's just a hotkey, or that's just a color, or something like that.
Well, that leads to one of the other questions. We sort of sorted this out ahead of time. I've got notes. One of the other questions is there's sort of a loop. There's an interaction between you guys and the rest of us. And sometimes, as Sven was just saying, that gets a little bit complicated. You know, why doesn't it do this? Why does it do that? What do we have to do? Does that sort of community interaction, that sort of community expectation, put pressure on you? Do you feel that it puts pressure on you? And if so, do you deal with it by like crawling into a hole for a few days and not answering any DMs? Or how exactly do you handle that?
So yeah, especially in terms of the tooling, I think the biggest thing that I get asked is, can you add this constraint that, you know, I'm working on a puzzle with this constraint and your solver doesn't support it, can you add that? And also, how do I install it? So, or why can't it just be on the web? You know, all these expectations of that. But I think the big thing with me is I have no problem just saying no. So I have a lot going on in my life, especially now. I have a 6-month-old daughter. So Her name is Lily. And so things have, but I still continue with my full-time job as well as multiple hours a day making my YouTube content. And so I have had very little time for my solver, and I think people have gotten used to requests going into the wind when it comes to that. But I do have a lot of stuff going on in the background that I do hear. I basically hear an aggregate of feedback, right? So maybe individual feedback doesn't get immediately addressed, but there's enough people giving me feedback that I can build kind of a model in my head of what does the future look like, and how do I help continue to help this, support the community in ways that it's evolving. And so I don't like to announce these projects until they're close, because I have a graveyard of 200 started projects on my hard drive right now. So I'm very good at starting projects, and I'm amazed that there was one that I was able to finish that people actually use. So in terms of expectations, I actually really like hearing the feedback. I like hearing when people are kind with their feedback, especially. So yeah, so Jenny from the chat asks WebAssembly. So for those who don't know what that is, it's a way to sort of compile non-JavaScript programs to run on the web. And I actually do have a graveyard tombstone for the WebAssembly version of my solver, which one of the issues is it is written in C#, and though C# technically has WebAssembly support, it's not very good and it's very slow. So I think they're working on improving that. They probably have improved it since I last looked into it. But the real project that I think the real solution here is something that I have put quite a bit of effort into, as well as other members of the community contributing quite a bit, which is a JavaScript version of the solver. And so I think that is kind of the future. And then also integrating with other platforms besides fpuzzles, perhaps. So as I look at Sirxemic. But like I said, I don't like that this isn't an announcement of those things. This is just kind of what I see as the real needs of people, which is, I can basically count the 3 needs. One is integrate it into the website without having to install something. Just have it work, please. 2 is have it work in Sudoku Maker, please. And 3 is, can it support my random constraint? And so I think Sudoku Maker also has that really nice custom constraint thing, but I think I can work with Sirxemic to make that more accessible to people who aren't programmers. Because I think right now, Sirxemic, you probably have a similar story of, instead of, hey, can you support my random constraint? And then I just say no. Sirxemic says, hold on, let me whip you up a script, which is very respectable, but I'm sure is time consuming. So.
It depends on the constraints. Some constraints are just basically concepts we're familiar with, like just these 2 cells need to sum to something. I have components for that, and then it's just 5 minutes work. But sometimes constraints, like I don't even know from when they ask, like, how do I even code that? Like that happens, but not that often actually. And so if you have an idea, just shoot me a message and I'll look into it. I say that now as if, because until this moment, the amount of requests hasn't been that big, but I shouldn't have said that probably. It's this moment where I take over I forgot the context of what was the question again.
How do you feel about
How do you feel expectations?
Oh, the expectations. Yeah. So yeah, on top of that even, yeah. So Sudoku Maker for me is just a hobby project, and I think I've made that clear more or less in the community. I don't feel much pressure because of that. People understand that, yeah, I also have time. I need time for myself. So, yeah, I don't know what else to say. Yeah.
On the note of hobby projects, I think, because I get that question a lot, yes, Sudoku Pad is what I do full-time, and I've been doing it full-time for more than 4 years, almost 5 now. And that brings with it other challenges. I think for me, the core value that I put behind Sudoku Pad is its universality. So one of the issues I have with certain sort of requests is that often I immediately think about the wider consequences. And it's easy to say, oh, I have this particular workflow and I want this thing to happen when I do this thing. It's harder to think about, okay, what does everybody do and what does everybody want to happen? And that especially comes when it comes to user interface things with cross-platform stuff, mobile, web, things like that. For example, often people want a particular hotkey or a particular thing to happen when they press a particular key or button, and they don't realize that those buttons aren't always in the same places, and other people are used to this button doing that, and other people are used to that button doing that, and other people don't have any buttons, they just have a touchscreen. For example, the letter tool is one of those things which is, in my mind, not a fully developed feature because it doesn't have full alphabet support on mobile devices, right? It does have 10 letters and stuff. And I have thought about many different ways of how to do it, and I need to pick one and do it. But part of the reason why I haven't picked one is because none of them are as good as I would like the solution to be. And that's quite often the problem, that the things I put into Sudoku Pad, I prefer to be the best version of that. And I don't always do it. Sometimes I flippantly throw something in there half-baked. But that's just me blowing up some steam. So when people ask for features and I don't do them or I respond negatively to them, it's not necessarily because I'm dismissive of them. It's because it's potentially something I've put in a lot of thought in already, and I have a lot of frustration with the fact that I haven't found a solution to the problem yet. And it doesn't mean that I wouldn't want to solve it. It's just that right now I wouldn't know how to. And in fact, one of the things I would like to do in the future is to actually bring people onto a live stream or a video and talk to them. You want me to add what hotkey? Let's talk about it. Let me explain to you why that's difficult. Or maybe you have an idea where you say, oh, well, why don't you just do a gesture or something? And I'm like, oh, I haven't thought of that. So it would be interesting to document some of these, especially for the more popular and obvious things that people expect me to do and that haven't happened yet. Other than that, like I said earlier, please tell me about these things, because the more often I hear of a thing, in my mind, it brings up the importance, and I realize, oh, this is something people really care about. And regarding expectations, one of the issues I have is that sometimes people will come and say, oh, you should support this vague thing because I think I want to make puzzles with that. And to that I say, well, you think you want to do puzzles with that, so before I put 2 or 3 or 4 weeks of my life into it, let's make sure you actually will make puzzles with that. And I actually have a feature submission process, which I need to promote more. It's a write-up on a GitHub issue about, I want you to set some puzzle. I want you to have 5 puzzles ready to go, even if they're scribbled on a piece of paper. So I know there's more than one puzzle possible with that constraint. So I know that you spend at least some time thinking about it before you ask me to do many, many hours of labor to try to make it work, and to expect, 30,000 people every day to download an extra 5 to 10 kilobytes of code that then maybe will never be used for anything because you decided not to make the puzzle. So yes, I'm absolutely up for adding features, and sometimes a small or simple idea like, puzzle fog can be really, really amazing, Other times, who did the reverse fog thing? So other times, yeah, maybe there's only one good puzzle in a mechanic, and maybe there's more, but we don't know until we make more than one puzzle. And one of the things I would like to do for Sudoku Pad, as well as in collaboration with Sudoku Maker, is to find ways of enabling puzzles with unique features as one-offs for some sort of test scenario where we're like, okay, we don't have to create a new version of Sudoku Pad, but maybe we can make a puzzle with a bit of clever code that, kind of what Chameleon did for the puzzle fog when he implemented it first, and test it out in a simple environment before we commit to putting it in front of everybody. So yeah, the expectations I've learned to kind of deal with the need to say no, and sometimes I'll be honest with the need to ignore. Like I have some email accounts where I have unread emails piling up, but I can see they're all the same message, and I should reply to them. But sometimes it takes mental energy just to say, this is happening, this isn't happening, I'm sorry about that, this is how that works, et cetera, et cetera. And the real solution going forward is not just better documentation, but better access. You know, the app itself needs to guide people to how things work. And I think this ties in with introducing people into the community and the entry cost of, you know, tutorials of how to learn and so on and so forth. And that should include how to use the application. And one of the projects I'm working on is an educational version of the app, which includes reducing the complexity of the user interface and slowly introducing additional buttons and features. And hopefully that will be also a way of notifying people of what's possible, because the app does a lot of things that most people don't know about. There's things the app does I don't know about because I forgot. Sometimes people tell me, oh, this thing, and I'm like, what thing? And I'm like, oh, wow, okay, I forgot it does that. For example, did you guys know there's a mode for shortening center marks? So there's a mode that if you have more than 5 center marks, it abbreviates the groups. All right, some people know, right? This is something I built a long time ago, but it was one of those features where I didn't feel confident to make it default. It wasn't good enough. I didn't want to remove it because I put a lot of work in it. But sometimes these kind of features is what I have to make decisions. Like, do I leave it in? Do I put it as a setting that some people get to use it, but nobody knows about it? Or do I remove it because it's just not universally applicable, right? And these are things that are, there's no right answers to these things. So, you know, I gotta make a lot of wrong answers a lot of the time.
We can perhaps get back to the idea of complexity once we turn it over to the audience. I'm sure all of us who have worked on big software projects have had the experience of discovering that the software can do something that you didn't realize you'd put in there. By the time you get to a couple million lines of code, that will happen. But I want to pick up on another one of you guys' prepared questions. We're spoilt in this community that we get all this stuff for free. People are making puzzles and just putting them out there in the wild for free. People are making tools that you can just download and use. And it's all done out of the goodness of our hearts. It's all a hobby, to use the word you guys have used. But I want to pick up on a live stream that the SudokuCon team did some months ago about making money out of puzzles. There are some people who are making small amounts of money. As James Sinclair said on that stream, yeah, but they all still have their day jobs. But still, how do you feel about that? Are there ethical issues in your mind about making money from the tools that you're making? What do you feel are the ethical issues about potentially charging money to the Sudoku community? How do you feel about that in generally? Or put another way, why is it that, say, Sudoku Maker is still free?
So this is something I put a lot of thought into, is how to ethically get money from the community, basically. Like, what is ethical and what is not ethical within my own standards of what I would want to do. Because, you know, I do put a lot of time and effort and experience into the community, and people use my tools every day. But I release them open source, and everyone is free not only to use the tool, but to, you know, if you're a programmer, go in and use the code as well. My Sudoku solver is GPL licensed, which means you can't use it commercially unless you also publish the source code, right? Or basically, if you publish it, also publish the source code. But newer stuff I've been working on, I've just been making like even more permissively licensed, because at this point, I'm like, the way I feel is, if I'm going to put my time and energy into this is a niche community, and it's a community of very diverse backgrounds, people from all over the world, and I don't want it to turn into some sort of elitism where people who can afford the convenient tools and the useful tools can use them, and people who can't afford it are, you know, SOL. And so but then there's also the number of hours that I put into it, and I feel like, you know, some people may want to support me for that, may want to, you know, as simple as buy me a coffee or support me on a more monthly basis. And so, for example, I have a Patreon, which wasn't well advertised. The 1.0 version does advertise it a little bit, but the Patreon is, it's a single tier Patreon with a minimum of the smallest I can have Patreon, which is $3 a month. But with this tier, you can go in and choose to donate more per month if you'd like to. And the Patreon basically says, this is to support me for what I already do. And that's kind of where I'm drawing the line, especially within this community, which is, if I'm going to make a feature or an improvement or anything, it's going to be available to the whole community. But there are community members who can afford to or would like to, you know, support that kind of effort financially, and I'm perfectly happy to accept that, as long as they accept that they're not getting any special privileges for it. And so I actually have quite a few patrons, despite the Patreon saying you get nothing. So yeah, that's very kind of the community to do that, and I get very kind messages when people sign up saying, I use your tool so much, I figured it's worth a few bucks a month to you know, support that ongoing effort. And so that's kind of where I've been drawing the line. So I have in the past, for example, gotten one-off commissions to add a feature, but I make sure the person knows, well, yes, I'll accept your money to make that feature, but everyone's going to get to use it, not just you. So, and so far no one has said, no, that's not acceptable. But if they did, then I would just say, no, I'm not going to do it. So that's where I'm drawing the line. I don't want to be exclusionary. I am trying to then also consider how we can, how I can kind of improve that passive income, how to encourage people who can afford to do so. I've been talking with some professors, for example, who want to use it in their classes, and they've been talking to the three of us, and basically the conversation has been, how do we get you money? and us saying, well, I don't know, because it's free. So that's something we're still working through, and so there may be, it may turn out to be that there could be features that I would still find ethical to put behind a pay barrier. For example, if it requires me to run and maintain a server, then I feel like it's ethical to charge a fee to sign up for that, because I am literally paying out of pocket to have this server and to maintain it. So I think things like that, like if I had some reason to have a user account where, you know, there was cloud storage for stuff, for example, then that might be something I would charge a couple bucks for, right? So that's still something swimming in my head, and I'd love, actually, if anyone has feedback, you can even contact me privately on, like, what would you consider to be an ethical thing to charge for versus, like, what would you be angry at me if I charged for? That's actually really good to know. So yeah, I'll pass this on to Sirxemic.
Well, actually, Rangsk basically touched on most of the points I already wanted to say. Sudoku Maker is free because I just want people, like, I just want amazing puzzles. And that's, like, sure, money is nice, but just having a project to spend my spare time on and have just cool puzzles in return is also very nice. I have a link people are using to donate money to me. That's also great. And the only thing I'm thinking of, like, maybe make that a paid feature is indeed, like, if I added some sort of user account feature, because indeed that would cost like there are server costs to that. But other than that, I don't expect from me, like, paid features like extract constraints or anything like that. It's going to be like the ability to make amazing puzzles will always be free.
Premium constraints, no?
No premium constraints.
Well, so I think as one of the few people in the industry that does this full time, it's been an interesting ride and both a struggle as well as a surprise. To be honest, when I started, I didn't think 4 years down the line I still would be doing this rather than having shut it down and taking a job. So that's actually a really, really amazing thing. The other thing is that I've been in a similar boat where I can't think of a thing that's worth money that I can deny to the community as a whole without causing some serious issues. And I have largely been depending on the kindness of strangers. And I think there's been some conflicts where that hasn't been made explicit, and that's on me. For example, initially I still sell it, there's a mobile app version of Sudoku Pad. And initially, the advantage of it was the access to offline puzzles and storing puzzles and playing them on a plane and all this sort of things. But due for some technical reasons, it hasn't been updated in a while, and now it has really been more of a detriment where people buy it and then don't get the same quality experiences on the website. And I've always seen that app more as a sort of donation. It's like people buy the app to support me rather than to actually use it. But it's not a good look for people outside the community that buy it and then like, what the hell is that? So it's definitely something I need to address in the future and fix. On the other hand, I had a Patreon that has grown really quickly and beyond my expectations. But I've also not been promoting it. I've not been pushing it very hard. And I feel like I recently looked at the top 10 donors, and they've put in the vast majority of the money, and they're very, very kind people in the community. But I also cannot, I don't want to rely on their shoulders to run this tool for everybody. I've had amazing support from the academic community. Hopefully that will result in a version of Sudoku Pad that's suitable for education. And that has been absolutely amazing. But also education is not in a very, very stable situation at the moment, as some of you might be aware. So that's also something where I can't say this is a business model. Part of my goal for the rest of this year is to actually figure out the product. What is the product? How do I create a product that's satisfying, that's worth money, and that is not exclusionary? And that's a little tricky. The way I look at it is it's a bit of a pyramid. At the top there are relatively few content creators, YouTubers, tool creators. There's a small group of people that operate there, and they have visibility. They've provide value to a lot of people. Then we have a middle layer of puzzle creators. There's more of them. They provide the vast majority of the value because without them we wouldn't have any puzzles, right? And then we have a large base of puzzle solvers, and there's the most of those. The problem is usually it's the YouTubers who approach me and is like, hey, I wanna give you a chunk of money because I love your tool and I really want to support you and I'm really passionate about it. Then the setters come and it's like, hey, I would like to, I use your tool, it's my hobby, I'm spending a lot of time with it, I really want to support you, and then I can figure out a commercial value to them, I'll give you custom URLs for your puzzles, and in the future, hopefully other valuable tools. But it's actually the reverse of what I would like, because the vast majority is at the base of the pyramid, and for them it would be a much smaller financial investment to support the people at the top, which are a very small group, right? And that I haven't figured out yet, because we have that problem of like initial access. We don't want to charge to play any puzzle, because then the community won't grow. And I think, again, I'm super surprised and happy when setters come to me and it's like, oh man, I want to support you. But I'm like, you're setting puzzles, you're creating the value. For every setter, there's 100 solvers. For every $100 you give me, those solvers would only have to pay $1 for the same outcome. And that's, I think that's the struggle as well for you guys, because your customer is the setter, but the ultimate value goes to the solvers, and they're not really connected to you. And I think it's currently an unsolved problem. One of the things that I personally think I can contribute is the scale. I have more access to the solvers than other tool creators. And one of the things is obviously commercializations of puzzles themselves. A marketplace for setters to sell puzzles, which is definitely something I'm working on. But again, it's also difficult because you're competing with free puzzles. Now you have a conflict between different kinds of setters. You have an incentive to do certain things in puzzles, like so far we had no incentive for negativity in the community in terms of plagiarism or even algorithmic manipulation, right? There's no algorithm, so nobody's building puzzles that are clickbaity, except some jokesters amongst you. But the moment money gets involved, that's a risk, and it could be a destructive force, right? So it goes back to a certain responsibility I feel for, because I could do certain things and they could be really bad. Some of you might have noticed there's a promotion space at the end of puzzles that I occasionally use, and currently there's a promotion for SudokuCon on there. And currently I only promote James Sinclair's artisanal Sudoku newsletter because it is a commercial venture, and he said, okay, we've tried it out, and he said it works out for him. For the promo that we show, he gets signups on his newsletter, and it works out. And I've already had screenshots sent to me of angry users about seeing that promotion. And that promotion shows up, I think, 4 or 5 days a month, only to certain, not to veteran players. It doesn't show when you've solved a lot of puzzles. It doesn't show when you haven't solved a lot of puzzles yet. And still there's people saying, oh my God, why is there ads on my puzzle, right? And it's an ad for more puzzles, most of which are free. And that's why I'm super cautious and super hesitant, but it's obviously also slows down the process of figuring out how this whole thing would work. But I think it's something we want to be, for example, Rangsk and I had a discussion a long time ago where he said, it's very important that tools are open source. He cares about the community, and he was concerned because Sudoku Pad isn't open source. And the reason is because I'm still trying to figure out how to run it as a business, but it's also not really closed source. There isn't really a lot of hidden stuff. A lot of people, I've had people contribute code to it because they just figured out, okay, I can just get the thing and then I can figure out how to do it. And then it's like, hey, here's the code if you want to put it in. And I have some guest contributions in the code, but it's not officially open source, mostly for that reason, because I'm still figuring things out, not because I wouldn't want to. My dream is to have a big enough Patreon, for example, that I can just work on open source tooling. But I feel a vote of confidence from the community that nobody has found the need yet to replace Sudoku Pad in earnest, that hopefully I'm doing something right, and hopefully I keep doing that in the future.
We have about 20 minutes left, and I'd like to open the floor for audience questions. So anyone who wants to broaden the discussion, please come straight up to the mic, and I will let you guys deal with it your own selves.
Hi, I'm in a lot of ways the quintessential person that Sven was talking about looking for. I would just happen to, during the pandemic, be bored and notice a couple of old guys playing video games badly. And then I was like, oh, they play like that newspaper game really well? That's weird. And now I'm at a convention for it. And I'm only at this convention because I happened to see an artisanal Sudoku ad, and that led to an email chain that got me here. But I tried maybe a year ago to get into setting, even so far as to wiggle my way into the CTC Discord. And as a not native Discord user, you're kind of funneling a specific amount of people into these tools, and it's only the people that know how to look through pinned comments in 100 different threads. And there's not a direct line, I feel to be able to just create. And if there was a big button above those tools that said, make your own, and it led to the home page of Sven's site that has just some basic, these are the tools, these are how we make them. This is the YouTube that has a guide or something. Then it would just be a little bit easier to realize that this stuff, I spent a week just writing them down on pencil and paper because I could not figure out how to use these tools or where to find them. And I know that a lot of that onus is only on Sven because you're getting that direct open, window to the community through CTC, like directly, like coming to your site. I don't mean to put all that pressure on you, but I do think that, like, as of right now, it's a little bit like veiled. There's a fog of war that's hiding the ability to create puzzles.
Guilty as charged. There is, for me personally, there's been one aspect though also, which is that I try not to play favorites. So sitting here next to these good gentlemen, it would be easy to say, oh, the quintessential way of creating puzzles is go to Sudoku Maker or download the solver. But in reality, there are many tools, many I might not know about. There's every now and then I come across people who are angry that Sudoku Pad is a thing because PenPal is the only true way to solve puzzles. And while it hurts a little, I respect and appreciate those people, and for me, that's a sign to do better. And it wouldn't be a sign to go to war and say, pretend PenPal doesn't exist. So one of the problems I have is, as a sort of entryway, is that I can't just link to one thing. I am working on I feel like Sudoku Pad is a good place to put resource pages, to say, here is a page with a bunch of tools. Here's a page with setters, etc. That is public access, that people can go to and add their thing. So something like an open wiki of some kind, and I'm trying to figure out a good way of doing that well. But again, I'm super cautious when it comes to these things because I don't want to, I know people will get mad at me and won't tell me and I won't find out, and then suddenly months down the line, I realize somebody hates me because they've been working on that for a long time and they're really upset with me doing a specific thing. And there's a reason why the site hasn't changed radically and quickly. Even just the order of pencil marks has been a contentious issue because some other app does it in a different way. And these are things I want to improve and fix, not stomp my feet and say, oh no, this is my way. I am not the specialist, I'm not a setter, and that's almost deliberately so, because I do not want to be biased. I do not want to build a tool for myself that does the things I want it to do. I want to build a tool for the community that does the things the community needs it to do, and sometimes that includes doing things that the community doesn't know it needs to do. And that's sometimes hard. It's sometimes hard to say, you guys don't really want this. You don't want puzzles to be able to include high-resolution pixel images, for example. You don't want puzzles to include live links to arbitrary websites in their descriptions. You think you do because you would only do so responsibly and only link to your own personal page. But if the app did stuff like that, virus puzzles would suddenly be a thing. So it's what you've mentioned is a little bit of a wake up because, yeah, some of it could actually be kind of simple, but it's also not necessarily as simple as it seems. But it's definitely something I'm working on. It's definitely, there's a list of things that I think about a lot, and creating pages of, simple example, it seems obvious I should have a page with the definitions of constraints and rules. But it is not my job to say what is a rule and what is a constraint and how a German whisper and a Dutch whisper and a Swedish whisper differ, right? Some of those are easy. Killer cage, we all agree, but then suddenly somebody will disagree and somebody will say a cage means this and a killer cage means that, and a killer puzzle is actually every cell is part of a cage, and this is actually a partial killer, and you've got the definition wrong and you suck. So this is all sort of things. So for example, one of the projects that I cooperate with, which is Project 9x9, which is an academic project towards education for children, they will work on at least core definitions. And once those exist and they're built by an independent party, I would love to use this to seed some kind of wiki where I think we can all maybe collaborate to build this thing, where I probably will not participate because I do not want to be a voice of some ignorant idiot who doesn't know how to set puzzles telling you what a puzzle is, right?
I just wanted to add that I think you really hit the nail on the head on that there are gaps in the variant Sudoku ecosystem right now, especially within our community. and it is incredibly Discord dependent, to the point that I would say we are a Discord community exclusively. The only way to get puzzles for Sudoku Pad that's that isn't like random people's Patreons or single publishers is a website, Logic Masters Germany, a website that defaults to German and looks like it was built in 1998. And yet, I know of at least 3 people who have very happily announced that they're working on and are close to finishing a new puzzle discovery portal, and none of them have yet to appear. So it's a much more difficult problem than, hey, just build this, right? Because build this means someone else please build this. I think the 3 of us have our hands full and would absolutely love to be able to build puzzle discovery, tutorial forums, places to go to be a community that isn't Discord. And I feel like we need more community members to sort of step up and be able to finish those kinds of things.
It's not a programming problem. That's the problem. I'm a programmer, and it's not a programming problem.
If it was a programming problem, we have lots of programmers in the community who can do that. There's some kind of barrier to being able to finish that kind of project, and it's a managerial problem almost, and it's an organizational problem. I think happy to take more questions. Oh, did you want to say something?
There's a question online for me. What is the Easter egg? Because Sudoku Maker actually has an Easter egg, and I'm not sure if I should just tell you. Like that's kind of the purpose of an Easter egg. But I'll give a hint. When you create a puzzle, like click the new button, just take a look and see if something's off and try to interact with it.
That's a big hint.
Yeah, maybe too big of a hint, but I think I've told people about it, like hinted about it, but maybe it's time that it's a bit more public.
That's a SudokuCon exclusive for all of you.
Hi. So I feel like the one thing I still don't understand about Sudoku Pad is how new puzzles actually enter into it, especially before Sudoku Maker was a thing. Like I looked on your homepage actually yesterday, I couldn't figure out how that actually happened. So I'm also just curious about how the interaction between your 2 products, for lack of a better word, actually works.
Can I handle this at the laptop?
Sure.
Even though it's your software.
But do you think it's a mechanical question or a philosophical question?
This is a mechanical question, right? Not a philosophical question? Yeah. Okay, so basically, if you install my solver, and it's a little bit hidden because it's part of the solver script because, again, organizational issues here. And you go to export, there is actually an open in Sudoku Pad button. So if I make a very valid classic Sudoku here with only one solution, and then I click open in Sudoku Pad, then it opens it in Sudoku Pad, and now you have a link you can share. And that is kind of the original way people were doing that. Actually, the original way people were doing that is clicking open with link. Sorry, let me just always allow domain. Okay. There's this string of very comprehensible base64 encoded data after the load equals. And if you go to Sudoku Pad and you type fpuz, and then you paste that as the rest of the URL, then you are now in Sudoku Pad with your puzzle. And so there have now been various ways that that has been streamlined because I guess people didn't like doing that. But that was the original way to get your data into Sudoku Pad. So there is this export button if you have my solver. There is also this amazing website, which I don't think I have it bookmarked, but it's the Penpa importer. Penpa, yeah, here it is. Oh no, that's Penpa. Mark. Oh, if I Google it, it should come up. There it is. Wow. So this page here, if you Google the very obvious Mark Tech Fan, you get the Penpa converter. So originally this was to actually import Penpa into Sudoku Pad, which you can do, but it also supports basically any, it supports the fpuzzle URL as well. So you can just take your exported fpuzzles here, and you can paste that in here, and then you just click Convert Puzzle, and it'll open it in Sudoku Pad for you. And it's got really nice features, including the ability to directly edit the JSON of what you're importing, which you can actually take an existing Sudoku Pad puzzle and edit that JSON data, and that is how people are doing the craziest stuff in Sudoku Pad, where if you ask, hey, how did that person do that weird curved line? The answer is they hacked the literal JSON data behind the puzzle by hand. So anyway, I thought that was a good opportunity to go over that history of how things got into Sudoku Pad and why basically no one knows how to do it unless they're told.
And one brief philosophical note is that the whole system is an absolute mess in a way that has benefited the community and created the most amazing things, and now I'm very hesitant to make it better.
Well, yeah, I just want to thank you guys. You can't underestimate the value you've added to the community. I mean, I do the Smart Hobbies YouTube channel, 1,000 people watch every day. Rangsk, you and I have talked on Discord many times. You've helped me out so much in how to set and how to do puzzles. And then with Sudoku Maker, what you just showed, the amount of value you add to people by taking a paper pencil puzzle and putting it into something they can solve on their mobile or on their desktop, that's what people love. They love being able to solve the puzzles using that. And of course, Sudoku Pad I've been using for the last few years. So the question I have is, since I mainly focus on classic Sudokus, you guys are talking about how this community here, we're more on the niche end, pushing the envelope of what you can set with puzzles and constraints. There's still people at that entryway, right? Oh, I just was solving the New York Times, and now I want to get and find these more advanced strategies. So that's kind of where my channel sits, that entryway. What they ask for, comments, hundreds of comments, they say, I want an app, unlike Sudoku.com app, which is, it generates the puzzles, but I want to be able to solve it like in Sudoku Pad. I want to be able to color the candidates. I want to be able to mark the candidates. The limitations in Sudoku Pad, obviously, is you can't randomly generate puzzles. You know, they want to be able to generate puzzles similar to Sudoku, where you can set a particular strategy. I want to practice skyscrapers. You click it, practice, puzzle generates with skyscrapers. Are there any ideas or options to do that, to make self-generating puzzles where you could practice certain strategies?
So I think the classic Sudoku community actually, as a whole, have their own tooling ecosystem, and there are a lot of, what's interesting is I think every single day there's at least one university student who says, I want to make a Sudoku generator. I think it's actually a really neat exercise for new programmers to look into that. And then they learn that, unfortunately, you can't just make a unique Sudoku. You have to make one that solves in a particular way, and then that's a much more difficult problem. And so, in fact, even convincing them that Sudoku has to be unique sometimes is difficult. They hear that the minimum givens is 17, so that must be the hardest puzzle. So if I add 17 numbers, then that's a Sudoku, and it's very hard. And that is just simply not the case. So I do know that actually a good resource to go to for classic Sudoku solvers is the Sudoku subreddit, where they often have tooling recommendations for how to generate puzzles and things like that. So it would be really nice to be able to bridge those communities, but I feel like there's some animosity, not on our end, but there is animosity in the classic Sudoku community, where they don't really like the variant community very much, and so that has been a barrier.
You mind if I take this to the laptop?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll make it quick, because I have dabbled in this, and I believe this is something, it's one of those things that I do and then don't tell anybody about. If you go into the settings, of which there are plenty, and you go under experimental, there's a button that says endless puzzles, which is an absolute lie. But if you press that, you will get two sets of puzzles. One are endless X Vindoku, and the other one are endless killers. They're not exactly classics, but it's the idea of what it would look like. And the way I think of it is that you don't really need an infinite creation algorithm, because you don't play infinite puzzles. And I have some similar experiment, and if people are interested, talk to me, where I encoded 5,000 killer puzzles in a very simple file, and you can just select them and play them. And it'll take you a while to get through them. And you don't need to generate any puzzles because they've already been generated a year ago. And I think there's something to be said of having collections like this for people who just want to go, I'm watching TV and I just want to go through them and I won't think too hard, or I want to practice and things like that. But again, I'm not a setter. I haven't written these algorithms, and I don't want to compete with the people who do. But if somebody has an algorithm and they say, hey, I've made 1,000 classics and I think they're of decent quality, we can talk about putting them somewhere that people can play them.
So I have a bit of a technical question because we did the aesthetics of Sudoku yesterday and saw all of the cool things we could draw. Was trying to understand, how does the like free-form drawing we were able to do translate into the JSON object that we were just seeing on the screen, and does that just explode the size of the payload that we're pushing into Sudoku Pad?
It does, but but virtually Sudoku Pad has this API which you can actually upload the data to, and then the URL created for it is just very short. So because of that API, the URL size won't be an issue for Sudoku Pad. It will sometimes be an issue for Sudoku Maker. So when you have like a very complex Sudoku Maker puzzle with lots of detail, and you try to share that URL with someone, it might just fail. Like tiny URL, the shortener will just error, and the current version doesn't even tell you something went wrong. But I've made a solution for that, that you can actually download the puzzle as a file, and then open that file.
Okay.
The short answer is it's a bug. The long answer is that internally, when I bring in the data from the file and pass it on to the SVG renderer, I'm not sanitizing the data correctly, and it turns out that it passes the D attribute straight through, and people basically embed raw SVG path data into non-SVG elements, and that data just gets copied through, and it sort of kind of works.
Oh, so that could be a potential injection vector. Okay.
You can inject lines.
Yeah, okay. And then I guess my next point is, like, you kind of danced around it, but it feels like statelessness is very important, and not having to host servers. Like, is that something you guys have thought about? What would be a feature where you were, like, storing a database full of puzzles?
The 2024 was the year I was going to dedicate the entire year of building a proper user account system. There is no user account system, and it is not 2024, so that's how that went. But that is the thing, the thing that Sudoku needs, and it's one of those things that I really want to get right, so I'm not rushing it. Currently, there is a database. The puzzles are all, since about a year and a half, getting stored on the server. There is probably around 50 to 100 pieces of data per puzzle, which means I have a record of the setting process. The database is currently not fit for publishing because I do not have rights to these puzzles. I do not have correct attribution. I have, letters as authorship, but I have no reference to who that really is. And that will be probably the next big step for Sudoku Pad, is to have a proper publishing process where people can say, this is my puzzle, here's my email address, you can talk to me about it. You're allowed to do this, it can show up in a search. I don't want people to make a video about it, but I do want people to do this, etc. That is the next big step.
Maybe a quick question for Rangsk. So the solver, I realize this is maybe a really subjective thing because everybody solves puzzles differently, but have you thought about having an option on the command line where it could output like a difficulty score for the puzzle?
You've opened a can of worms with computers determining the difficulty of a puzzle.
Totally. I realize it's subjective.
And I'm kind of against it. I think humans should determine the difficulty of humans solving a puzzle. I've never been happy with any computer solution. Like there's the standard SE rating, that's Sudoku Explainer rating for classics, and it's notoriously incorrect and different for every person. But it's kind of become a fun technical challenge to just find a puzzle that has the hardest SE rating. But at some point, no human can solve it unless they're a very specific human. And so Philip wants to talk about this, I think.
Come back tomorrow for my presentation if you want to learn more about difficulty ratings and computer solvers.
Yeah, there you go. Watch Philip's presentation. He has more time for that.
Well, thank you all. I want to thank our panelists. And I'll tell you, the difficulty ratings comes up in my line of work as a language teacher also. It's an impossible problem. Like, how hard is this text to read for second semester Latin students? You can't really rate that. Our next session is in 15 minutes. It will be on the mathematics of pencil puzzles with Zeta Math. Be there or be square.